Maya Chen wiped the grease from her hands and looked around her small repair shop. The metal walls were covered with tools of every size and shape. Some were for fixing human ships, others for alien vessels that came through Terminus Station. She had been running this shop for 5 years now, ever since her father retired and moved back to Earth. The shop wasn't big, but it was honest work, and Maya was good at it. Terminus Station floated at the crossroads of 5 major hyperspace lanes. Ships from all over the galaxy stopped here to refuel, repair, and trade. At least, they used to. These days, the station felt different, quieter, emptier. Maya noticed it first, about 6 months ago, when her regular customers started coming less often. Then, they stopped coming altogether. The problem wasn't her work. Everyone knew Maya Chen could fix anything with an engine. Or more specifically, the problem was that nobody knew what money was worth anymore. The galaxy used something called universal credits for trade. It was supposed to make everything simple. 1 credit here was worth 1 credit there, anywhere in the galaxy. But the galaxy was a big place, and space was weird. Ships traveled faster than light, jumping through hyperspace to cross vast distances. Communications also traveled fast, but not instant. And then there was the problem of time itself. Maya didn't fully understand all the science, but she understood the result. When a ship left one side of the galaxy and arrived at the other, time had passed differently for the ship than for the places it left and arrived at. Messages sent between star systems took time to arrive, and during that time, things changed. The value of credits changed, sometimes a little, sometimes a lot. The Galactic Economic Council had tried to fix this. They were made up of the smartest beings from the most advanced civilizations. They built computers that could calculate faster than anything humans had ever made. They created algorithms and predictive models and complex financial systems. Nothing worked. The paradox was simple to explain, but impossible to solve. If you agreed to buy something for 100 credits, by the time the payment cleared across the galaxy, those credits might be worth the same, or they might be worth 10,000, or they might be worth 10. Nobody could predict which way it would go. The math was too complicated, the variables too many, the distances too vast. So people stopped trading. It was safer to hold on to what you had than to risk losing everything in a transaction that might bankrupt you or enrich you randomly. Without trade, the economy froze. Stations like Terminus started to suffer. Maya looked at her empty appointment schedule. She had 1 job this week, a simple thruster alignment for a human cargo hauler. That was it. 1 job. She used to have 10 or 15 jobs a week. She walked through the station's lower decks, where her shop was located. Many other businesses had closed. The neon signs were dark. The corridors that used to buzz with a dozen different alien languages were now silent. She passed by what used to be a Zentari restaurant. The Zentari were insect-like beings who made the most amazing fermented foods. The restaurant was closed now. The owner had returned to his home world. Next to it was an empty shop that used to sell Corvin textiles. The Corvin themselves were energy beings, but they created fabrics that could change color with your thoughts. Maya had bought a scarf there once. Now the shop was empty, with a for lease sign in 3 different languages. The station itself was starting to show signs of neglect. A flickering light panel that would have been fixed immediately a year ago now stayed broken for weeks. The air recyclers in some sections weren't working at full capacity, making the air feel stale and thin. The station authorities didn't have the credits to pay for repairs, because the businesses weren't paying their fees, because they weren't making money. It was a downward spiral, and Maya could see it happening in real time. She returned to her shop and sat down at her small desk. The desk had belonged to her grandfather, who had been the first Chen to work in space. He had started as a mechanic on the early Mars colonies, back when humans were just beginning to reach out into their own solar system. Her father had continued the tradition, and now Maya carried it forward. 3 generations of mechanics, and she might be the last if things didn't change. Her computer screen showed the galactic news. The Economic Council was meeting again, trying once more to solve the credit paradox. They had been meeting for months. Maya scrolled through the proposals. Some wanted to create regional currencies to limit the distance transactions had to travel. Others wanted to abandon currency altogether and return to direct barter. One faction proposed freezing all credit values at a single point in time, which sounded good until you realized it was impossible to enforce across relativistic distances. None of it would work. Maya could tell just by reading the proposals that these were people trying to solve a math problem with more math. They were brilliant minds, yes, but they were all thinking inside the same box. She heard a knock on her shop's door. It was late in the station's artificial day cycle, well past normal business hours. Maya stood up and walked to the door, wondering who would be coming by at this hour. When she opened the door, she found herself looking at a Vrelnathi. The Vrelnathi were tall, thin beings with 4 arms and skin that shimmered like oil on water. This one was wearing a captain's uniform that had seen better days. His large eyes looked tired, and his translator device crackled slightly as he spoke. "Are you Maya Chen, the mechanic?" he asked. "I am," Maya replied. "Can I help you?" The Vrelnathi captain glanced behind him nervously, then back at Maya. "My ship's engine is failing. I need repairs urgently, but I must be honest with you. I cannot pay you right now. My cargo must be delivered first, and that will take weeks, and by then who knows what credits will be worth." He paused, his shoulders slumping. "I understand if you cannot help me. 17 other mechanics have already refused. I am asking only because I am desperate, and someone told me humans sometimes take strange risks." Maya looked at the captain. She could see the desperation in his alien features. She thought about her empty schedule, her dying station, and the galaxy's broken economy. She thought about her grandfather, who once told her that sometimes the best business decision is the one that makes no business sense at all. "What's your name, Captain?" she asked. "Kix. Captain Kix of the merchant vessel Steady Profit, though the name feels like a cruel joke these days." Maya smiled. "Well, Captain Kix, let's go take a look at your engine." Captain Kix led Maya through the docking bay to his ship. The Steady Profit was a mid-sized cargo vessel, the kind that had been the backbone of galactic trade for centuries. It looked old, but well-maintained, or at least it had been until recently. Maya could see small signs of neglect, the kind that appeared when a captain couldn't afford regular upkeep. They climbed aboard through the cargo bay. Maya noticed the bay was full of sealed containers, all marked with Vrelnathi symbols she couldn't read. Kix led her to the engine room, and the moment the door opened, Maya heard the problem. There was a rhythmic knocking sound that made her wince. That was never good. She spent the next 2 hours diagnosing the issue. Kix stayed with her, handing her tools and explaining what had happened. The ship had jumped through 3 different hyperspace lanes in the past week, and each jump had put stress on the engine's coupling system. One of the couplings had cracked, and now the entire drive system was misaligned. "I can fix this," Maya said, pulling herself out from under the main drive assembly. "But I'll need parts. Some I have in my shop, but 3 components I'll need to order from the station supplier." Kix's face fell. Even across the barrier of species, Maya could read disappointment. "And the supplier will want payment immediately, yes?" "Probably," Maya admitted. "These days everyone wants payment up front. Too risky otherwise." "Then I am defeated," Kix said quietly. "I have credits, but if I spend them now on parts, I may not have enough to buy fuel for the next jump. And if I do not deliver this cargo on time, I will owe penalties that will bankrupt me. I am trapped in every direction. Maya sat down on a toolbox, thinking. The problem was clear. Kix needed his ship fixed to make money, but he needed money to fix his ship. It was the same trap everyone in the galaxy was caught in. Fear of the future had paralyzed the present. She thought about her grandfather again. He had worked during the early days of the Mars colonies, when everything was uncertain and dangerous. People traded favors more than currency back then. You fix someone's life support today, they'd grow extra food for you tomorrow. It had worked because it had to work, because people trusted each other to make it work. Captain Kix, Maya said slowly, what if I fix your ship now, and you pay me later? Kix stared at her. His translator crackled for a moment, as if it couldn't quite process what she had said. You would trust me to pay you? After the delivery? When we do not know what the credits will be worth? Yes, Maya said simply. But this makes no sense, Kix said, his forearms gesturing in what Maya assumed was confusion. What if the credits lose value? You would lose money on the deal. What if I simply do not return? What if I take my repaired ship and disappear? You would have nothing. Will you do that? Maya asked. Disappear and not pay me? Kix drew himself up, and Maya realized she had offended him. Of course not. The Vrelnathi honor their debts. We invented the credit system 5,000 years ago. We understand the value of trust in trade. Then there's no problem, Maya said. She walked over to a small cabinet in the engine room and pulled out a piece of paper and a pen from her toolkit. The paper was real paper, made from trees, an expensive luxury in space. She used it for making quick sketches and notes when her tablet was charging. She wrote on the paper, Captain Kix owes Maya Chen for engine repairs. Payment due upon delivery of cargo. Signed. She signed her name and dated it, then handed it to Kix along with the pen. Kix looked at the paper like it was an alien artifact. What is this? Mara explained. It's an IOU. It means I owe you. It's a promise. A written promise that you'll pay me. But there is no blockchain verification, Kix said, bewildered. No encryption. No digital signature with temporal stamps. Anyone could forge this. It has no legal standing in the Galactic Commercial Code. It has standing with me, Maya said, and it has standing with you, because you said the Vrelnathi honor their debts. That's enough. Kix held the paper carefully, as if it might crumble in his hands. He read what Maya had written several times. Then, slowly, he signed his name in Vrelnathi script at the bottom. His hand was shaking slightly. I do not understand humans, he said softly, but I accept your terms. Thank you, Maya Chen. Maya got to work immediately. She spent the rest of that night and most of the next day repairing the steady profit. She pulled parts from her inventory, the ones she had been saving for regular customers who might never return. She even contacted the station supplier and used her own dwindling credit account to buy the 3 components she needed. She didn't tell Kix that part. When the repairs were done, she ran the engine through a full diagnostic. Everything showed green. The knocking sound was gone, replaced by the smooth hum of a properly aligned drive system. Kix ran his own diagnostics from the bridge, then came down to the engine room with an expression that Maya's translator couldn't quite capture. Relief, maybe, mixed with something else. It is perfect, he said. Better than it has run in years. You have saved my business, and perhaps my life. I will not forget this. Just remember to pay me when you can, Maya said with a smile. And maybe tell your friends that Maya Chen's shop is open for business. Kix left Terminus Station 6 hours later. Maya watched his ship jump into hyperspace from her shop's small window. She looked at the paper he had signed, now safely tucked into her desk drawer. It was just a piece of paper with some writing on it. No encryption, no verification, no guarantee. But it was also something more. It was a promise. And promises, Maya had learned from her family, had value beyond any currency. 3 days later, Maya was working on the human cargo hauler when she heard voices outside her shop. She wiped her hands and went to see who it was. There were 2 alien captains standing outside, both species she didn't recognize. One was a floating creature with tentacles. The other looked like a walking crystal formation. "Are you Maya Chen?" the floating one asked through its translator. "Yes," Maya replied cautiously. "Captain Kix told us about you," the crystal being said, its voice sounding like wind chimes. "He said you fixed his ship without demanding immediate payment. He said you accepted a promise instead of credits." The floating captain pulled forward. "My ship also needs repairs, but I cannot afford the uncertainty of current credit values. Would you accept the same arrangement?" Maya looked at both of them. She thought about her empty schedule, her dwindling savings, and the piece of paper in her desk drawer. She thought about the risk she was taking and the fact that this could all go very wrong. But she also thought about the alternative. She could say no, play it safe, and watch her business slowly die along with the rest of the station. Or she could take a chance on something that humans had been doing since before they even had currency: trusting each other. "Tell me about your ships," Maya said, opening the door wider. "Let's see what needs fixing." By the end of the week, Maya had 6 pieces of paper in her desk drawer, 6 captains who would return and pay her when they could, with credits that might be worth more or less than they were today. Her father would have thought she was crazy. Her grandfather would have smiled and told her she was finally learning what it meant to be a mechanic. The steady profit jumped back into normal space near Terminus Station 23 days after Maya had fixed it. Captain Kix docked and walked straight to Maya's shop. He was carrying a payment device, and his expression was difficult to read. "Maya Chen," he said formally, "I have returned to honor my debt." Maya looked up from the engine she was calibrating and smiled at Captain Kix. She had wondered if he would actually come back, despite the promise he had made. A small part of her had worried that she might never see him again. But here he was, standing in her shop with a payment device in one of his 4 hands. "Welcome back, Captain," she said, wiping oil from her fingers. "How did the delivery go?" "Better than expected," Kix replied. "The cargo arrived on time, and I received payment. The credits fluctuated during my journey, but fortune smiled on me. They increased in value by 17%. He held out the payment device. "I owe you for the repairs. The original estimate was 4,000 credits. With the increase in value, those same credits are now worth much more in real terms. I will pay you 4,000 as we agreed." Maya shook her head. "If your credits are worth more now, then you should pay me the equivalent value, not the same number." "That's only fair." Kix looked confused. "But our agreement said 4,000 credits. I signed the paper." "The agreement was for fair payment for the work I did," Maya explained. "The number was just an estimate based on what credits were worth at that moment. If they're worth more now, you should pay me less credits to equal the same value. If they're worth less, you should pay me more." This seemed to genuinely surprise Kix. "I have never heard of such an arrangement. You would accept less payment than agreed?" "I would accept fair payment," Maya said. "That's the point, isn't it? We're both trying to do business fairly, not trying to take advantage of each other." Kix stood silently for a moment, his eyes moving in a pattern that Maya had learned meant he was thinking deeply. Finally he said, "I will pay you 5,000 credits. The original 4,000 in value, plus additional for the lesson you have taught me." The Vrelnothi claimed to understand the value of trust, but I see now we have forgotten much. Before Maya could respond, he transferred the payment. Her account, which had been dangerously low, suddenly showed a balance that would keep her operating for months. "Thank you," she said quietly. "No," Kix replied. "Thank you. I have already told 20 other captains about you. Expect more visitors soon." He paused at the door. "Also, You should know that someone from the Galactic Economic Council has been asking questions about your business practices. A being called Harmonics in Calculation. They seem very interested in how you are managing to operate while everyone else is failing. After Kix left, Maya sat down at her desk and updated her ledger. She had started keeping a physical notebook to track all her promise-based transactions. It was easier than using a computer, and somehow it felt more real to write things down by hand. She had 23 outstanding promises now. 23 captains who owed her payment for repairs. Some were due back soon, others might take months. But she also owed promises to others. She owed her parts supplier for components. She owed the station's energy company for power. And she owed a Corvin textile merchant who had reopened their shop and sold her new work clothes on credit. The ledger showed who owed what to whom, all written in simple language with signatures. No encryption, no blockchain, no temporal verification. Just promises and trust. Maya heard the sound of crystalline chiming before she saw the visitor. The being that entered her shop was like nothing she had encountered before. It appeared to be made entirely of crystal, but the crystal moved and flowed like liquid. Light refracted through its body in patterns that hurt to look at directly. The sound it made was musical, like an entire orchestra playing in harmony. Maya Chen, the being said, and its voice came from a translation device that floated nearby. I am Harmonics in Calculation, observer for the Galactic Economic Council. I have been sent to investigate your business operations. Maya stood up and offered her hand, a human gesture that she knew most aliens found strange. Harmonics in Calculation extruded a crystalline appendage and touched her hand briefly. It was cold and smooth, like touching ice. Please, have a seat, Maya said, gesturing to a chair. Though I'm not sure if you can sit. Harmonics flowed around the chair instead, forming a structure that approximated sitting. I am here to understand your system. Trade activity at Terminus Station has increased by 47% in the past 2 months. Every other major trade hub in the galaxy is still declining. The only variable that has changed is your introduction of what you call promise-based credit. Explain. Maya pulled out her notebook and showed it to Harmonics. It's simple. People promise to pay me when they can, and I promise to deliver quality work. We write it down, we both sign it, and we trust each other to honor the promise. Harmonics crystals shifted and flowed as it examined the notebook. This is not an algorithm. There is no predictive model. How do you calculate the risk of default? How do you hedge against temporal arbitrage? How do you account for credit value fluctuation across relativistic distances? I don't, Maya said simply. The crystals stopped moving. You do not account for these variables? Then how does your system function? Maya sat down on her workbench. Look, the whole problem with the credit system is that everyone is trying to predict what credits will be worth in the future, right? But that's impossible because of how the galaxy works. Time and distance make prediction impossible. Correct, Harmonics said. This is the paradox we have been attempting to solve for decades. So I'm not trying to predict, Maya continued. I'm separating the promise from the value. When Captain Kix promised to pay me, he wasn't promising me 4,000 credits worth exactly what they were worth that day. He was promising to pay me fairly for the work I did. The number didn't matter as much as the intention. Harmonics crystals began moving again, faster this time. But this leaves you vulnerable to value fluctuation. In the short term, yes, Maya agreed, but over time, it averages out. Some of my customers pay me when their credits are worth more. Some pay when they're worth less. Some pay me extra. Some pay the minimum. But they all pay because their reputation matters more than any single transaction. Reputation, Harmonics repeated. This is a social variable, not an economic one. Economics is social, Maya said. That's what everyone seems to have forgotten. Credits are just formalized promises. You promise that this piece of data is worth something, and I promise to treat it as valuable. The whole system is built on trust, but somewhere along the way, people started trusting the math more than each other. Harmonix was silent for a long moment. Its crystals shifted through colors Maya had no names for. Finally it said, "Show me your ledger in detail. I wish to analyze every transaction." For the next 3 hours, Maya walked Harmonix through every promise she had made and received. The observer asked detailed questions about each one. Who was the person? What was their species? What was their history of reliability? How did Maya assess their trustworthiness? Maya answered honestly. Sometimes she didn't know if someone would pay. But she also explained how the network worked. Captain Kix had recommended other captains. Those captains recommended more. If someone failed to pay, word would spread and they would be cut off from the network. The threat of social exclusion was more powerful than any legal contract. Fascinating, Harmonix said. You have created a reputation-based buffer system. The promises themselves become a form of currency independent of the universal credit value. I guess so, Maya said. I just call it doing business the way my grandfather did. Harmonix crystals suddenly aligned into a pattern that almost looked like excitement. I must report this to the council immediately. Your system may not solve the paradox, but it circumvents it entirely. If the value of the promise matters more than the value of the credit, then credit fluctuation becomes irrelevant. I'm not trying to break any laws, she said. You are not in trouble, Harmonix assured her. You may have saved the galactic economy. The observer flowed toward the door, then paused. One question, Maya Chen. What if someone defaults? What if they take advantage of your trust? Maya shrugged. Then I lose money on that deal. But if I never take the risk, I definitely lose everything slowly. I'd rather take a chance on people and be wrong sometimes than assume everyone will cheat me and be right. Harmonix chimed in a way that the translator rendered as laughter. Humans, it said. You are such strange creatures. The galaxy is fortunate you joined us. The Galactic Economic Council chamber was enormous. Maya had never seen anything like it. The room was a perfect sphere, with delegates from hundreds of different species positioned around the curved walls using various forms of gravity manipulation. In the center floated a holographic display showing economic data from across the galaxy. Most of it was red, indicating declining trade and failing markets. Maya stood on a small platform that had been positioned for human gravity preferences. She felt very small and very out of place. She was wearing her cleanest work clothes, which still had a few oil stains that wouldn't come out. Around her floated, sat, or otherwise positioned themselves some of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. They were here to judge whether her simple system of promises could save their complicated economy. Harmonix in calculation spoke first, its crystalline form refracting light across the chamber. Council members, I have completed my investigation of the human Maya Chen and her promise-based credit system. In summary, she has created a buffer mechanism that separates transactional promise from currency valuation, effectively rendering temporal credit fluctuation irrelevant to immediate trade. A large being that looked like an animated thundercloud rumbled in what the translator called speech. Explain in practical terms. How does writing promises on paper solve a mathematical paradox? It does not solve it, Harmonix clarified. It makes it irrelevant. Observe. The holographic display changed to show Maya's transaction ledger. The human does not attempt to predict credit values. Instead, she records promises of fair payment. When payment occurs, both parties negotiate what fair means based on current values. The transaction is balanced not by mathematical precision, but by mutual agreement and social pressure. Avrelnath the Elder, much older than Captain Kix, spoke up. The council should note that this is not unprecedented. The Vrelnathi used similar systems in our early trade history, before we developed the universal credit. We called it the Promise Web. It worked well for several thousand years. And why did you abandon it? Asked a floating brain in a jar, representative of the cerebral collective. We believed we had evolved beyond it, the Vrelnath the Elder admitted. We thought mathematical precision was superior to social trust. Perhaps we were wrong. A delegate that looked like a colony of insects moving in formation buzzed its objection. This system cannot scale. It works for one small mechanic on one small station. How could it possibly work across the entire galaxy with trillions of transactions? Everyone turned to look at her. She felt her heart beating fast, but she had agreed to come here and explain, so she would explain. "Excuse me," she said. "May I speak?" "You may," said a being that appeared to be pure energy contained in a force field. It introduced itself as Speaker for the Council. "You are the subject of this inquiry. Please explain your system in your own words." Maya took a deep breath. "I'm just a mechanic. I fix engines. I'm not an economist or a mathematician. But I know that credits are supposed to represent value, right? The problem is that nobody knows what value means anymore, because time and space make everything uncertain." She gestured to the holographic display. "You've all been trying to create better algorithms to predict credit values. More complex math, faster computers, more sophisticated models. But the galaxy is too big and too weird for any prediction to work perfectly. There will always be uncertainty." "Yes," agreed Speaker for the Council. "This is the paradox. Continue." "So stop trying to eliminate uncertainty," Maya said. "Accept that it exists and build around it. My system works because I'm not promising a specific credit value. I'm promising fair treatment. The people I work with promise the same. When they pay me, we look at what credits are worth right then, and we agree on what's fair." The insect colony buzzed again. "And what prevents fraud? What prevents someone from claiming any payment is fair, regardless of actual value?" "Reputation," Maya answered. "If someone cheats me, I tell others. Those others stop working with the cheater. In my network, being known as trustworthy is worth more than winning on any single transaction. People want to stay in the network, so they act honestly." A crystalline being similar to harmonics, but colored differently, spoke up. "This is classic game theory. Iterated prisoner's dilemma with reputation tracking. It works in small networks, but breaks down at scale when anonymity becomes possible." Maya nodded. "That's true if you're thinking about it like strangers trading once and never seeing each other again. But that's not how the galaxy actually works. Captains follow regular routes. Merchants deal with regular suppliers. Even in a huge galaxy, trade networks are made up of smaller connected groups. You don't need everyone to trust everyone. You just need connected networks where reputation matters." The Vrelnath the Elder made a sound of approval. "The human is correct. The ancient promise web worked because the galaxy was naturally organized into trade routes and regular partnerships. We abandoned that structure for a universal system, but the universal system failed to account for universal physics." Speaker for the Council dimmed slightly, which Maya's translator suggested meant it was thinking. "Let us consider implementation. How would we apply this human system across existing trade networks?" "You wouldn't force it," Maya said quickly. "You can't make people trust each other. It has to be voluntary. But you could create frameworks for people who want to use promise-based credit. Official ledgers, reputation registries, dispute resolution systems. Keep the universal credit for people who want it, but offer an alternative for people who are willing to trade on promises." The thundercloud being rumbled. "This seems primitive, a step backward." "Is it?" Maya asked. "Humans used to trade with physical money, coins made of metal, paper bills. Then we moved to digital credits, then to blockchain verification. Each step was supposed to be progress, making things more secure and more efficient. But you know what? My grandmother still remembers when you could do business with a handshake and your word. She says people were more honest back then because they had to be. Your reputation was everything. She looked around at the assembled delegates. Maybe the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy need to remember that before there were credits, there were promises. And promises only work if you keep them. The chamber fell silent. Maya worried she had said too much, or said the wrong thing. But then the Vrelnathi elders stood up, all four arms raised in a gesture Maya didn't recognize, but somehow understood meant respect. The human speaks wisdom, the elder said. The council should vote to implement a hybrid system. Universal credits for those who want them, promise networks for those who trust them. Agreed, said Harmonics in calculation. My analysis shows that even a partial adoption of promise-based credit would restore 30 to 40% of lost trade volume within one standard year. Some were supportive, others skeptical. The debate went on for hours. Maya was asked dozens of questions. How would disputes be resolved? How would new members join networks? How would cross-network trades work? What about species whose psychology didn't support trust-based systems? Maya answered as best she could, but she kept emphasizing the same point. You couldn't force this system. It had to grow naturally, built on voluntary participation and genuine trust. The Council's role should be to support and facilitate, not control and mandate. Finally, Speaker for the Council called for a vote. The decision was not unanimous, but it was clear. The Galactic Economic Council would officially recognize and support promise networks as an alternative to pure universal credit trading. They would create frameworks and infrastructure, but participation would be voluntary. As the vote was finalized, the thundercloud being rumbled one more time. I still believe this is primitive, but I also acknowledge that our sophisticated systems have failed. Perhaps sometimes the solution is to remember what worked before we became too clever for our own good. Maya smiled. That was exactly what her grandfather had always told her. After the vote, many delegates approached Maya to ask more questions or express their views. The Vrelnathi elder introduced himself as High Merchant Vex. He had been trading for over 300 years. Your grandfather would be proud, Vex said. You have reminded us of something we forgot. Credits are promises. Promises require trust. And trust must be earned and maintained. Thank you, Maya Chen. As Maya left the council chamber, Harmonics in calculation floated alongside her. You did well, human. You may have saved more than just the economy. You may have saved the idea that the galaxy can cooperate based on something other than cold calculation. I really hope so. Maya returned to Terminus Station 3 days after the council vote. The trip back felt longer than the trip there, even though it was the same distance. She kept thinking about what had happened, about the responsibility she now carried. The council had voted to implement promise networks based on her simple system. What if it didn't work on a larger scale? What if she had given them false hope? When her transport docked at the station, she was surprised to see a crowd waiting at the arrival gate. There were dozens of beings from different species, all watching for her. As she walked through the gate, they started making various sounds that her translator rendered as applause. Captain Kix pushed through the crowd. Maya Chen, you have returned. Everyone has heard the news. The council's decision is being broadcast across all the major trade routes. Promise networks are being established already. Already? Maya asked. But I just left the council chamber 3 days ago. News travels fast when it is good news, said a Korvan merchant that Maya recognized from the textile shop. I have already registered my business with the new Promise Network system. So have many others here on Terminus Station. The crowd parted to let Maya through, and she walked slowly toward her shop. The station looked different. Lights that had been broken for months were now fixed. The air smelled fresher, and there were people, so many people moving through the corridors. Shops that had been closed were opening again. She heard multiple languages being spoken, the sound of commerce and life returning. When she reached her shop, she found a message waiting on her computer. It was from the council. They wanted to officially designate Terminus Station as the first Promise Network hub. They wanted to use Maya's ledger system as the template for the official registry. And they wanted her to serve as an advisor to help other stations set up their own networks. Maya sat down heavily in her chair. This was more than she had expected. She had just wanted to fix engines and help a few desperate captains. Now she was apparently some kind of galactic economic revolutionary. There was a knock on her door. Maya looked up to see an unfamiliar being, something that looked like a walking plant with multiple eye stalks. "May I help you?" she asked. "I am Roots in Deep Soil," the being said through its translator. "I represent a coalition of agricultural worlds. We have been unable to trade our crops because of the credit crisis. Many farms are failing. We heard about your Promise Network. Can we join?" "Of course," Maya said. "That's the whole point. Anyone can join if they're willing to honor their promises." Over the next few weeks, Maya's small shop became an unlikely hub of activity. Beings from across the galaxy came to learn about Promise Networks. She taught them the basic principles. Make promises you can keep, pay fairly based on current values, build reputation through honest dealing, and support others in your network. Some species adapted to the system easily. Others struggled with the concept. The cerebral collective, beings of pure logic, had trouble understanding why anyone would accept uncertainty. Maya had to explain that trust wasn't about certainty. It was about confidence in another person's character. The Vrelnothi, on the other hand, took to Promise Networks like they had never left. High Merchant Vex visited Terminus Station and spent hours with Maya, sharing stories about the ancient Promise Web. He helped her understand the pitfalls to avoid and the traditions that had made it work for so long. "The key," Vex explained, "is that promises must cost something to break. In the old days, a Vrelnothi who broke a promise was marked with a symbol that everyone could see. They could still trade, but everyone knew to be cautious with them. The shame was worth more than any penalty the law could impose." Maya incorporated this into the Promise Network framework. Beings who failed to honor their promises would have it noted in the public registry, not as punishment, but as information. Others could then make informed decisions about whether to trade with them. A month after the council vote, the first economic reports came in. Trade volume across the galaxy had increased by 15%. It wasn't a complete recovery, but it was the first growth in over a year. The universal credit system was still available for those who wanted it. But more and more traders were choosing Promise Networks for long-distance transactions. Maya was working on a Zentari ship when Captain Kix arrived at her shop again. She had seen him several times since the council meeting, but something about his expression this time was different. "Maya Chen," he said formally, "I have come to settle my debt." Maya wiped her hands and looked at him confused. "What debt? You already paid me for the engine repairs." "Not that debt," Kix said. "The real debt. You saved my business, you saved my life, and in doing so you saved the livelihoods of thousands of other captains and merchants across the galaxy. How does one repay such a debt?" Maya thought about it. "You already have. You trusted me when I asked you to trust. You told others about the Promise Network. You helped it spread. That's payment enough." Kix shook his head, all four arms gesturing in what Maya had learned was disagreement. "No, that is participation. That is being part of something larger. But you personally are owed more." He held out a payment device. "My cargo run was very successful. The credits I earned have appreciated significantly. I want to give you triple what I originally owed for the repairs," Kix said. "Kix, that's too much," Maya protested. "It is exactly right," Kix insisted. "In the old Vrelnothi tradition, when someone saves your life, you owe them a life debt. The debt is not measured in credits, but in worth. You gave me back my future. What is that worth?" Maya looked at the payment device, then at Kix. She thought about her grandfather, about the lessons she had learned, about the strange journey that had taken her from being a simple mechanic to an advisor to the Galactic Economic Council. "A debt is not just what you owe," she said slowly, "but what you want to repay. Is that right?" Kix's translator made a sound of approval. "Yes, exactly. You understand the true nature of credit. It is not mathematical. It is personal." Not because she needed it, though the money would certainly help expand her business. She accepted it because refusing would diminish what Kix was trying to express. The payment wasn't about credits. It was about gratitude, respect, and the honoring of a relationship that mattered. After Kix left, Maya sat in her shop and looked around. The walls were still covered with tools. The floor still had oil stains that wouldn't come out. But something fundamental had changed. Her small repair shop had become the birthplace of something larger, something that was spreading across the galaxy. She thought about all the promises in her ledger. Hundreds of them now, from beings of dozens of different species. Each promise was a small thread of trust, connecting one person to another. Together, those threads were weaving a new kind of network across the galaxy. Her computer chimed with a new message. They wanted to commission a monument at Terminus Station, recognizing it as the birthplace of the Promise Network revival. They wanted to put Maya's name on it. She read the message twice, then started writing a reply. She asked them not to put her name on the monument. Instead, she wanted it to honor her grandfather and all the other ordinary people throughout history who had understood that economics was really about people trusting people. The council agreed with one condition. They wanted to add a quote from Maya. She thought for a long time about what to say, then wrote, "Before there were credits, there were promises, and promises only have value if we keep them." Maya stood up and walked to her shop's window. Outside, Terminus Station bustled with activity. Ships came and went. Traders negotiated. Mechanics fixed engines. The galaxy was recovering. Not because someone had solved the mathematical paradox, but because people had remembered how to trust each other. She hung a new sign on her shop door, right below her name. It read, "All forms of credit accepted, especially your word." Within a year, Promise networks had spread to over 60% of major trade routes. The universal credit still existed, but it was now just one option among many. The galaxy had learned, or rather remembered, that there were multiple ways to assign value, and that sometimes the oldest ways were the wisest. Maya Chen continued running her small repair shop on Terminus Station. She was famous now, at least in certain circles, but she still did the same work. She fixed engines, she accepted promises, and she kept her own promises. That was enough. Sometimes late at night when the station was quiet, she would pull out the first piece of paper Kix had signed, the one that had started everything. It was worn now, the edges frayed, the ink slightly faded, but the promise written on it was still clear. She would hold that paper and think about her grandfather, about the lessons passed down through 3 generations of mechanics, about how the most sophisticated solution is sometimes remembering why you needed the system in the first place, about how trust is the foundation of all value, and how promises matter more than predictions. The galaxy had learned a lesson from a human mechanic with oil-stained hands and a notebook full of promises. They had learned that sometimes progress means going back to what worked before, that sometimes the future is found in the past, and that the most advanced civilizations can still learn from the simplest truths. Maya turned off the lights in her shop and locked the door. Tomorrow there would be more ships to fix, more promises to make and keep, more threads of trust to add to the growing network. But tonight, she was content. She had done what mechanics do. She had fixed something that was broken. The irony was not lost on her. The galaxy had called it an economic paradox. Maya had just called it a broken engine. And like any broken engine, once you understood what was really wrong, the fix was usually simpler than you thought. She walked through the station corridors toward her small apartment, passing shops and beings from across the galaxy. They were all here because they believed in something humans had known for millennia. That your word should be your bond, that promises should be kept, and that trust is the most valuable currency in any universe. Maya Chen smiled. Her grandfather would have been proud. The galaxy was learning to value credit the human way,